the one, the only, Bencio
Morning and welcome to another week of Yeshiva YouTube. Ideally speaking, today we're doing chapter 15 of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make. This is really technically the last chapter. Chapter 16 is basically a recap. So this is the last chapter where he talks about something new. It's titled The Distant Husband, and divided into two parts like I do every week. He starts off talking about a major shalom bias issue. I don't really have to get into the story over here. Basically, this is the 10th really dumb mistake that smart couples make, is criticizing your spouse. You should never criticize your spouse, because even though you think it makes sense, you might think they might change, but people take things very personally. Well, it talks about a story. I don't know if it was a true story. It seems like it was a true story, where a woman was a grammar teacher. And she's obsessed with grammar, and her husband's made some grammatic mistakes, and the woman would constantly correct her husband all the time in front of their kids, in front of guests. She didn't think anything great of it. She was helping him speak the proper grammar, but he was insulted and he was distant, and that's why it ruined their marriage. He says a rule for life. Here's a life hack: don't correct people. This is a rule for all relationships, not just marriage. If you feel a need to correct the people around you, you'll find yourself very unpopular very quickly. I think he's talked about this a couple of times. It goes within the category of insulting people. You should never insult people, especially your spouse. You shouldn't insult. Criticizing them for the mistake they made is a main way of insulting somebody. You really will insult people if you correct them. I know when spouses correct other people, the spouse is not happy. They're not happy. It usually happens women correct their husbands more than men. Women think they can fix their man, because women technically are a little better when it comes to day-to-day mundane matters. They know what's going on more in the world. Their head is not in the sky like people who are learning or people in business. So they're more intuitive as to what proper conduct and proper speech should be. But even if your husband is saying something wrong or misspeaking or saying something that he shouldn't be saying, it's not your place to correct him as a spouse, as a wife. You just ruin your marriage. You're not going to fix your husband. He's talked about this numerous times, that you don't fix a husband. People walk down to the chuppah with a list to do of fixing their husband. You're not going to accomplish anything. You're just going to cause a greater rift between the two of you. He doesn't really talk about that much in the first half of the chapter, but he tries to give you an explanation of why it hurts so much when you criticize someone, when you correct somebody. And this is kind of a theoretical type of chapter. He talks about the concept of free will. He asks the question, how is it possible that someone who is born with a neshama, which is very holy and pure, and only wants to do the right thing, has this person ever make a mistake? How is there a possibility of free will in the world? To that he answers, we have the concept of imagination. Imagination tells us, it can tell us crazy things. And it can tell us that we're right, even though, people always think they're right. People, no matter what they act, they do. They always find a way to rationalize, to justify what they do. It's just human nature. So therefore, the only way that it's it's free choice. It's actually a fair competition between the neshama and, I guess, the Yetzer Hara is imagination. He said, because you could imagine and you could rationalize, you do something crazy, you do something totally wrong, and you can say it's right. That's why he explains criticism hurts so much, or correcting hurts so much, because the person really thinks they're right. If they made a mistake, which you assume they did, or sometimes they actually do, they believe they're right. It's not that they know they're wrong. If they knew they were wrong, the criticism wouldn't hurt so much. They think they're right. Their imagination overpowered their neshama, so they believe they're right, and you criticize them, you're demeaning their self-worth. You're saying what they believe about themselves is not true, and that doesn't make anyone happy. When someone holds something to be a fact, and you tell them you're wrong, without giving a reason specifically, or even if you think it's justified, he doesn't think it's justified. That way, you're basically destroying the relationship because he thinks he's right, even though maybe he's not right, but he thinks so. Now, I don't know much to say about this. He's talked about this oftentimes in the book. I agree with him wholeheartedly. Women have to shut their mouths and not criticize their husbands. It's disrespectful to their husbands. And most of all, it's disrespect. It's not just the fact that you insult them. Men don't get insulted as easily as women, but they feel disrespected. When a man feels disrespected, if he loses his masculinity, and that is the biggest knock you can do to a man, is to make him feel like he's not masculine, because that's the essence of every husband, every father, every man wants to feel masculine. When a woman emasculates him by criticizing him or by saying that he's not right about something, it hurts him very deeply. I will disagree about his categorization of Bechira Chavshis, about free will. I'll say the following, that even though everyone says the neshama is your pure heavenly soul, the neshama is actually another name for the Yetzer Hara. The neshama wants to be ethereal. It wants you to leave this world. It doesn't want to be in this world. Like the Mesilas Yesharim says, a soul doesn't want to be here. The soul tells you to do lofty acts, to fast, to learn uninterrupted for 10, 15 hours. The soul wants you to basically get rid of worldly pleasures. And it's actually exactly the opposite. It's not your imagination which competes against the neshama. The neshama is telling you, it's not the one that's telling you the right thing. The neshama is telling you to do the wrong thing, to be otherworldly, to be not in this world. It's your seichel, your intuition, your intellect, which is basically your conscience, which is basically the Pintala Yid, which is basically everybody has inside of them a very small, truthful person. The more you build it up, the more you succeed in your free will, then you'll become yourself, right? He pits the neshama against the goof being evil, the neshama being holy. It's exactly the opposite. The goof, a person, all the right choices that a person has to make are all that make life for himself better. That's really all decisions boil down to. Every decision boils down to that. Are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it for some other motive? You're doing it because you want to appear more righteous than other people. You want to appear better than other people, right? That's the biggest Yetzer Hara is people want to kina v'atayva v'akavod. You want to do it for honor. You want to do it for jealousy. You want to do it for taiva. Taiva does not mean eating food that you like. Eating food that you like is a meritorious act. Eating food that you don't like, that's what taiva is. Taiva is pushing yourself to the borders. Taiva means in the Torah, Parshas Dvarim. Right, and Sefer Dvarim, we talked about the borders, right? You're pushing yourself to the boundaries, the borders, doing things that are not rational, right? Using your rational mind and acting like a normal human being, that is the correct way of the Torah. The Torah emphasizes that. You're not supposed to be strange, you're not supposed to be different, and the more you can stick to being a human being, being yourself, that will overcome the neshama, which is inherently your Yetzer Hara, and that's really, it's usually the opposite. That's the biggest mistake people make, right? It's all episode of the Seinfeld where you do the opposite. Yetzer Hara tells you to do one thing, you have to do the opposite. You do the opposite based on rationale, based on clear conscience, clear thought process. What makes it so difficult is not something called the imagination. It's something else called fear. People are fearful of doing the right thing. The right thing is doing for yourself, not to be selfish. When you're selfish, basically it means you're taking advantage of others. Selfish means bad selfishness is when you take advantage of other people. But good selfishness is when you worry about yourself. Worrying about yourself and your wants and your needs that are taken care of without stepping on other people's toes, without hurting other people, that is inherently meritorious. That's really good. People are fearful of doing that. Societal pressure, people have peer pressure, societal pressure, people think that other people are going to say negative things about them, their family, their friends, and even a person's fear about himself. He's going to feel like someone who's, a disgusting type of person. He eats food that he likes. He eats the rugelach aren't good, but he eats food that he likes. He's the bal taiva. The Yetzer Hara, the neshama, makes you fearful. You're not going to be an ethereal being. You're not going to be someone who transcends the world. And you have to use rationality and say, no, God wants me to be a human being. He gave me a body. Basar v'dam, that's what we are. We're essentially basar v'dam. We're flesh and we're blood. And the dam has the nefesh. Nefesh bahamis. Nefesh are physical desires. It doesn't mean we let the desires run rampant. When you let your desires run rampant, that's also not good because it's not a rational decision. You're not doing something that's going to better your life. If a person's obsessed, he has addictions, he's addicted to smoking, he's addicted to television, he's addicted to certain things, he can't go ahead with his daily life and make the right decisions, act like a rational person. But it's a balance. You have to balance it. But the most important thing in every decision is to do what is human, to do what is normal, to do what a rational person for the betterment of himself without hurting other people. And I think that's really sums it up what Bechira Chavshis is. And it's really not imagination, but it's fear which gets in the way. But it has nothing to do with criticism. He's talking about criticism over here. His explanation of Bechira Chavshis includes the reason that you rationalize things with your imagination, and therefore criticizing someone, you take away the person's imagination. I think the two things are not related at all. So that's what I have to say about the first half of the chapter. Stay tuned later in the week. We will have the second half of chapter 15, and maybe next week we'll wrap up this book. I'm not sure what book I want to do next. We'll see. Keep you waiting, keep you guessing. If you have a request, put it in the comments. Hope you enjoyed today's share. See you in the next one.